Hi, first grade. It is Mrs. Norris again, and we are going to talk a little bit more about Tomas and the library lady, but we are starting to wrap up this story, and I think you're really going to enjoy the next one that we get to read. So we're almost there. But today, we are going to talk about something that I noticed in the story, and I want to see if you noticed it too. So, when you hear me say the word imagination, what comes to mind? I'm going to give you a minute to think about that. When you hear me say imagination or using your imagination, what do you think about? Have you had a second to think about it? Okay, so keep that word in mind. And you probably thought something along the lines of using your imagination is pretending or making a picture in your mind of something that is maybe not real or is not happening at that exact time, but you're thinking about something, making a picture in your mind. So I just want to call your attention to that word and ask you to keep an ear out for the word imagination. Okay, so if we quickly look at our big questions, our medium-sized question, and our small question, we are still working on how do books change life for people around the world. And we're going to be able to answer that for Tomas. And then as we read our next several stories, we'll keep adding to that. We also want to think about, and we will think about how books change life for Tomas. That's our one slice of pizza question. But today, we're really going to just look at that bite-sized question. And if we look at the screen together, what does a deeper exploration of the main character reveal in Tomas and the Library Lady? And if you remember, a deeper exploration means to take a closer look, to study something a little more closely, and reveal is to have something be shown, to have something all of a sudden we didn't know something and now we know something. It's like to reveal, to have it be shown. So let's keep that question in mind as we continue on. Okay, so I've brought us to this specific page in Tomas, and it's right after he goes to the library, after he's sitting under the tree with Papa Grande. He knows all the stories, and Papa Grande says he's old enough to go to the library. There seems to be at this point of the story a change for Tomas. And if I read this page again, let's listen and see if you can think about what has changed for him or what is going on right now for him that wasn't happening in the beginning of the story. Tomas saw dinosaurs bending their long necks to lap shiny water. He heard the cries of a wild snake bird. He felt the warm neck of the dinosaur as he held on tight for a ride. Tomas forgot about the library lady. He forgot about Iowa and Texas. So, what is going on at this part of the story? Is he really seeing the dinosaurs? Is he really holding on to the dinosaur? No, you probably thought no. And that word that we talked about at the beginning maybe popped into your mind because it popped into mine, right? He's using his imagination. He is reading the book, and at this point of the story, this is the first time where he kind of forgets about where he is. He forgets about what's going on and being tired and hot and thirsty and not wanting to move back and forth. And he is in his imagination picturing himself with these dinosaurs, and he's getting kind of caught up in the books that he's reading and really enjoying them, and he's using his imagination. So what we're going to do now is just take a look at a couple of parts in this book. And I want you to think about, is this something that is real in the story, or is this something that is in Tomas's imagination in the story? Okay. And feel free, if you want to act them out for fun, you could feel free to do that and stand up. So if I were acting out this page, I might stand up and say, okay, like I'm on the dinosaur, I'm holding the dinosaur's neck, I can feel him moving, and I'd be thinking to myself, okay, is this really happening in the story, or is this part of Tomas's imagination? And I would say, oh, This is his imagination. So let's see if you can try it. Okay, so I've actually turned back a page and I have brought us to the page where Tomas goes into the library and is talking with the library lady. So maybe you're acting out, walking into the library like Tomas, he's talking to the library lady, she's holding the books. Think about, is this really happening in the story, or is this part of Tomas's imagination? I'll give you a second to think, and if you want to pause and act it out, feel free. It's real. It's real in the story. This is not in Tomas's imagination. All right, let's try another one. You guys are really good at this. Okay, what about this part? It says that he smelled the smoke in an Indian camp. He rode a black horse across a hot, dusty desert, and in the evenings he would read the stories to Mama, Papa, etc. Is this part real in the story, or is this part of Tomas's imagination? And if you want to try acting it out and pretend that you're riding the horse too and you're at this camp, and think about, is this really happening in the story? Is this part of the real story, or is this part of his imagination? Give you a second to think. It's part of his imagination, right? You guys are so good at this. He's reading the book about this time period and what's going on here, and he's imagining it in his mind, just like he did with the dinosaurs. So this is actually part of his imagination. Nice job. Okay, so if we can kind of take all of that we just learned and share some learning that we've had about Tomas, here's some things on the screen that I have learned from talking about this and trying to figure out what's real life and imagination. So I know in this story, things happen to Tomas in real life in the story, but he also imagines things. So there's both real life parts happening in the actual story, but there's also parts where he is imagining things. I've also learned that Tomas has a big imagination. How many of you think you have a big imagination? That makes doing a lot of things a lot more fun when you have a big imagination. And I noticed something else, that Tomas imagines with all his senses, right? He says he sees the dinosaurs. He can hear them drinking the water. He can feel their neck holding around their neck. So having a great imagination usually means that you use all of your senses to really imagine what that's like. Okay, so now that we have talked a little bit about imagination, we are going to do a deep dive and talk about vocabulary. And remember, those are words that we may not know yet, but we can learn different strategies for how to learn the meaning. But I think this might be a word that you're pretty familiar with. So we're actually going to talk about the word imagination. And what you see here is what's called a Frayer model. I know, fancy stuff, right? First grade. This is some fancy stuff. It's called a Frayer model, and it helps us to understand and really understand the meaning of different words. So this is actually in your Wit and Wisdom blue workbook, and it is the title, or the page number, I guess, if you want to call it that, is 5A, handout 5A. And that should be right here. Oh, there we go. Okay, 5A in your workbook. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and grab that workbook and open up to this page, that would be great. You can also pause at the end, and we'll be working on this together, and then you can take a picture and send it in through Seesaw. But if you want to go ahead and pause and grab that, that will be great. Okay, again, so you hopefully had a chance to grab your handout 5A Frayer model that is in your workbook, and you can just leave it in your workbook. But we can work on this together, and again, feel free to pause the video if you need to. So a Frayer model, like I said before, really helps us to understand what a word means. notes. And in this first box here, you see it says definition. And the definition of a word is simply means what the word means. So if you're using your imagination, how about this for a definition? How does this one sound? I'm going to write thinking about something that is not real or pretend. Okay, so thinking about something that is not real or pretend. And you'll notice that I did not use a capital letter or a period. I'm just kind of jotting down quick notes. This isn't meant to be complete sentences. We're just kind of jotting down some quick notes, making a list. That's how we can complete a Frayer model or something like this where we're taking notes. Okay, the next box says characteristics. And characteristics are just kind of like examples or things that would go along with this word. It's kind of like how to further explain what the word means or what the word is. So, using your imagination, you might think about a character in a story, right? That could be an example and a characteristic of something that is, it's not real. It's you're pretending and you're maybe imagining that you are with the character or you are kind of part of the story and imagining yourself in the story. Maybe it's also thinking about a made up place that you've never been to, but if you could imagine, I would love to go to somewhere that had all the donuts and sweets. I guess there's donut shops. That's not completely imaginary, but some made up place where I could just have as much donuts and treats as I wanted and just kind of walk around and it's all there. For me, that's a made up place that doesn't really exist. So those are some characteristics using your own imagination. Now, the bottom two parts say examples and then non-examples. So examples would be, things that are the same or show imagination. It's not unlike the characteristics portion for this. Different words will work differently with the Frayer model, but so some examples might be, like Tomas imagining you are with dinosaurs, right? That is something that couldn't happen in real life right now. That's not something that could happen since the dinosaurs are extinct. You couldn't really be live with the dinosaurs. Now, I want you to see if you can pause and come up with another example of imagination. Maybe it's, living in outer space or anything. Think about what could you use your imagination for, and an example of imagination, an example of something that is not real or pretend. So if you want to pause the video now and add in another example. Okay, now our last box, and then we will wrap up for this lesson. Our last box is what's called non-examples. So it would be the opposite of imagination, right? So what are some things that we could show as an example that would be real, right? How about in the how about I'm thinking about the story, but what about we say, our live class calls? That's something that happens each day, Monday through Friday, and it's something that's real. It's not something that we are pretending or making up. It's actually something that happens. So what we'd like you to try is to also list one non-example. So see if you can come up with an example of imagination, using your imagination, and then try to come up with a non-example. That means it would be the opposite of imagination. Okay? All right, so we know you are working so hard and you're doing a great job, and we are really proud of you. So keep up the great work. And just a reminder, it's in this book. So if you want to, again, pause the video and you can be working and looking at the video at the same time if that helps you. I'll move this box so you can easily pause. And then on the seesaw activity, you'll take a picture of this and of your completed workbook page, Frayer model, handout 5A, and then you can send it through Seesaw like you normally do. Okay? Any questions, let us know, and we can't wait to see your examples and your non-examples.